Welcome to ICE Webinars, a cool place for hot topics. ICE Magazine is proud to bring our new monthly webinar series to the imaging industry. ICE is the community that directly links nearly 7,000 imaging professionals with a monthly magazine, online community, annual conference, and now a monthly webinar series. We would like to invite you to ICE 2021 on May 11th and 12th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The Imaging Conference and Expo is the only conference dedicated to imaging directors, radiology administrators, and imaging engineers from hospital imaging departments, freestanding imaging centers, and group practices. ICE 2021 offers 32 continuing education credits from AHRA, and keeping in line with our successful conferences in the past, offers comprehensive educational opportunities for attendees. Our pre-show planner is available for download in the handouts section of your webinar dashboard. Please look it over and visit attendice.com for more details. We are excited about today's presentation featuring Brenda DeBastiani, Senior Director of Imaging at Mon Health Medical Center in Morgantown, West Virginia. Today's webinar is eligible for one ARRT Category A Continuing Education Credit by AHRA and is approved for one CRA credit. You can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. More details on this at the end of today's webinar. As I mentioned earlier, our presenter today is Brenda DeBastiani. She is a lifelong learner, serves as a member of the AHRA Board of Directors, is a noted speaker and presenter, a textbook editor, and holds a Lean Sigma 6 green belt. Brenda, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Good afternoon and welcome to Are You Ready to Change Your Culture? Again, I'm Brenda DeBastiani. I'm the Director of Imaging at Mon Health Medical Center in Morgantown, West Virginia. I've worked at a variety of clinics and hospitals, and Mon has been my home for the past 32 years. I've been a tech since 1986 and absolutely love radiology. So here's a picture of me with my husband, Eric, celebrating our 30-year wedding anniversary in Aruba. And when I say I love imaging, I also love the beach and I love my husband and my family. So I had to share some pictures here with you all. Here's a picture of our two children. Our son is a server bartender and he lives in Orlando, Florida. And our daughter is a registered nurse and neurostep down here at Ruby Memorial Hospital in Morgantown. And we're very proud of both of our kids. And I couldn't leave out my baby Zoe. She's a Havanese and poodle, half Havanese, half poodle, so a Havapoo. And my family jokes, okay, so maybe they're serious, but they say that I love Zoe more than I love them. I mean, if you're cute, you don't talk back and you give unconditional love, how can I not show favoritism, right? So what is West Virginia known for? Pepperoni rolls, coal mines, and the West Virginia Mountaineers. And if you didn't know this, don't ever bet against the Mountaineers and don't ever bet for them. They'll exceed your expectations or they'll break your heart, just like they did in the basketball game the other night against Syracuse. But we still love our Mountaineers. Here's a picture of West Virginia. And yes, it's really this beautiful, in case you've never been. So this is a picture of Mon Health Medical Center. Mon is a 189-bed general acute care hospital. We have a nationally recognized robotic surgery team, are the first and only AFib accredited hospital in West Virginia. We received the American College of Cardiology Heart Care Center of National Distinction of Excellence Award, and we're accredited by ACR in multiple imaging modalities in my department. We constantly strive to improve the quality of care that we provide. Here's our front lobby. When you walk in, you will see that the facility was designed to have storefronts. The first desk is the greeter desk. Then behind that to the left is the lab. In the center is women's imaging. And then if you go to the right, that's where you check in for all other imaging. The ICU, CCU, and the OR are on the upper level that you see here. So the design was thoughtfully planned to best meet the needs of our patients. We were designed using the Disney concept with on-stage areas and then behind-stage areas where patients are transported behind the scenes to maintain privacy. So there are three objectives today. One, empower your employees to identify system issues and to own their work environment. 2, identify behaviors and roadblocks that contribute to errors or bad outcomes that may have been preventable. And 3, promote a process where mistakes or errors lead to uncovering why the errors occurred, not automatically lead to punishment. You may be asking why this topic. Well, one of my peers from a different facility was complaining about how you have to just keep putting up with error after error. And I said, no, you don't. Haven't you ever heard of the just culture? The person didn't know what it was, so I thought it was a good topic to share. I'm not sure how many of you use just culture, or if you've never heard of it. So hopefully, if you're currently using this model, this will be a good review. And if you've never used it at all, take something back with you and you can apply it at your work. So the just culture was first utilized by United Airlines. Through resource management, CRM is used when human error can have devastating effects. The aviation CRM emphasized the need to change and correct deficiencies in cockpit crew behavior, especially if you have a junior crew member who doesn't assert themselves, or if you have a captain who's an authoritarian. In fact, the National Transportation Safety Board singled out one captain's failure to accept input from a junior crew member that led to a crash back in 1978. The plane ran out of fuel between JFK and Portland while troubleshooting a landing gear problem, and they crashed into a suburban Portland neighborhood, killing 10 on board. It was found that the pilot lacked situational awareness. The cockpit crew failed to work as a team to remind the captain of the low fuel situation. The entire situation led to a crew resource management revolution, where training was held to reduce errors and raise teamwork efforts. There was actually a Canadian TV series called Mayday that outlined a lot of these errors and tried to help the public understand what was going on. This CRM theory continues to be used today, more than 30 years later. This collaboration concept trickled over into the medical community. I'm sure you can easily see the correlation between an airline crew not working together well and a healthcare team not working together well. Both can lead to loss of life. There were a few books written that helped educate the public. First was Blind Trust. It's a book that sparked universal acceptance of crew resource management, but it also introduced culture-changing lessons that were discovered from aviation and put them into the medical practice. The Blind Trust made the Americans aware that there was serious aviation safety issues. Then the next book was Why Hospitals Should Fly, the ultimate flight plan to patient safety and quality care. It was authored by Nance, and it followed in the same tradition. Then David Marks came on scene. In 1997, Marks started a research and consulting practice focusing on the management of human error by integrating system and watching correct human factors, introducing the need for a just culture. So let's take a stroll down memory lane on how hospitals have handled errors. Back in the 1970s and 80s, there was a punitive culture. Employees were blamed, organizations didn't accept any responsibility, so the bad processes were never fully evaluated to determine why people sometimes messed up. The issues just continued. 9 out of 10 errors are normally more process related than people related. Let me say that again. 9 out of 10 errors are normally more process related than people related. The people didn't report themselves back then because they didn't want to be fired. I entered the radiology field in 1984 as a student, and I can attest that the culture was punitive. People were fired for errors, and people kept their mouths shut about their own errors because they didn't want to be fired. In the 1990s, the no-blame culture flourished, and it still endures today. Compared to the punitive culture, it was definitely a step in the right direction. The no-blame culture acknowledges that a large proportion of unsafe acts were honest errors, the kind that even the best people can make. But this concept had 2 weaknesses. One, it ignored or failed to confront those individuals who willfully and often repeatedly engaged in dangerous behaviors. And 2, it did not properly address the crucial business of distinguishing between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. In 1997, John Reason wrote that a just culture results in an atmosphere of trust, encouraging and rewarding people for providing essential safety-related information. Marks argued in 2001 that discipline need to be tied to the behavior of individuals and the potential risk more than the actual outcome of their actions. For example, whenever you have just culture, you're looking at just because a patient didn't die, that doesn't mean that the risky behavior can be ignored. Your behaviors and values affect safety. You're the leader. All this carries over into your employees' behaviors. There are a lot of ways to achieve safety: room design, personal protective equipment, equipment type, structure and process, persons involved, and amount of training, and so on. With a just culture, it starts from senior leadership down to the frontline employees. Everyone must make safety the top priority in order for the just culture to work. I witnessed this in action at our facility when COVID hit and there were not clear guidelines established yet. We had patients presenting with GI symptoms in the ER, and they were not initially considered as a person under investigation. But then 30 minutes later, after everybody did their thing with the patient, then the patient was placed in isolation. So our techs were very concerned about this, and I shared the concerns up the ladder, as did others. Processes were changed where these people were put in isolation immediately upon arrival to cut down on exposures. That was a huge win for our techs, since they were very focused on patient safety and the safety of themselves. According to the Joint Commission, a safety culture is characterized by a continual drive, the goal of a maximum attainable safety. If you set a goal of 100% and wish for it, how are you ever going to make it? However, if you educate over and over again on why you have your values set so high, your employees might actually start buying into why it's important and strive for it. For example, we do monthly audits for timeout documentation. When I started the audit several years ago, we're talking 2004, our goal was to be 100% accurate, but we were only 75% accurate. After years about talking about this expectation with our staff, reviewing it in staff meetings, counseling when timeouts were incorrectly done or were missing, and confronting staff about their behavior, finally, we're now routinely 100% accurate. Did I ever think I would see this day? No. The Just Culture model addresses two questions. Should we punish healthcare workers? And two, does the threat of disciplinary action or actually disciplining for human error help or hurt our system of safety efforts? We want justice. Did it kill the patient? No. Well, I guess it wasn't so bad. Or yes, it killed the patient, so the employee should be fired, right? Well, no, wrong. If an error happened to someone else, could I make that same mistake? These are all important things to think about. You could find reckless behavior that caused no harm, but it should warrant discipline. And you could find extreme patient harm related to simple human error that warrants no discipline. In a just culture, you don't look at the severity of the injury, but you look at the behaviors and intentions. A safety culture encourages critical thinking. Because we're human, we can make mistakes. You need to hardwire as much as possible to prevent errors. But as a healthcare worker, you may still make a human error. Does something feel wrong? We need to stop and double check what's going on. Ask questions. Employees must learn balance and self-discipline. They must feel comfortable communicating with fellow team members. All employees must feel empowered to speak up on behalf of the patient. Sometimes you might be driving your car full steam ahead and your brakes fail. You didn't do anything wrong. It just happened. But maybe you should have paid more attention whenever you were walking out in your garage that morning and you saw a puddle of fluid under your car. Just saying, you get red flags sometimes. You have to pay attention to the warnings. The employees need condition to pay attention and identify any red flags. If you empower your employees to identify the red flags and really listen to them when they talk to you about issues, they'll bring you more potential issues. You'll reduce your risk by listening. It might take a little bit more time right now, but think of the risk that you're reducing by addressing concerns before something bad happens. According to the Just Culture algorithm, there are three basic duties. Duty to do your job, producing the outcome related to your job, duty to follow rules, and duty to not increase risks. If you're competent, you should do your job correctly. For example, if a competent healthcare member fails to clean the skin before inserting an IV, did this person breach his or her duty? Yes, it is a responsibility to put the IV in safely, not just put it in. How often do you think employees break procedural rules? It happens daily. We just don't find out about it until something bad happens. Why do I say that? It is human nature to find shortcuts. As leaders, we have to set up procedures that actually work and explain why shortcuts are dangerous. The Just Culture describes three classes of human behavior that create predictability and error occurrence. Simple human error, inadvertently doing something other than what I intended. I thought I'd chose the right name off of the work list on the machine, but I guess I didn't. I was tired, I was interrupted, maybe I wasn't properly trained, or just, again, wasn't paying attention. At-risk behavior. When a behavior choice is made that increases risk, where risk is not recognized or it's mistakenly believed to be justified. Here the employee uses word drift. They didn't think they exactly made a horrible risk, but maybe they didn't follow policy. So I know I'm supposed to have my requisition there at my machine whenever I'm pulling the name off the work list, but I didn't have it. And somebody told me it was the right person, so I thought it was the right person. They drift. They pretend like that they're doing the right thing. Reckless behavior, conscious disregard for a substantial and unjustifiable risk. Maybe they didn't check the 2 patient identifiers. When I was looking for a picture of reckless behavior on Google, this is what came up. A woman driving a car while eating a donut, drinking a cup of coffee, and talking on the phone. Now, how many times have we tried that or something similar? Do we consider ourselves being reckless when we're making these types of decisions? I mean, I'm doing something like this pretty much every day. But why do we hold our employees at such high standards if they don't try to multitask and they mess things up? When deciding what kind of behavior an employee exhibits, you'll really have to see if that employee passes the substitution test. Would someone else with the same job and the same training have done the same thing? When a human error is made, you should ask yourself, is this a weak system? You need to make sure that if you can't hardwire the error from happening again, then you should at least have policies and procedures in place and adequate training given so that this error won't happen again. You need to put on your therapist hat at this time and console your employee if something bad happened. They didn't want the error to happen, and you just need to explain what they can do in the future to prevent it from happening again. When they see that I'm compassionate and that I want them to learn from their mistake, then you're usually very willing to open up and share their experience with their peers to prevent others from making that same mistake. At-risk behavior means the employee failed to follow proper procedure and probably ignored warning signs or ignored the double check processes that are there as a safeguard. Sometimes critical thinking is a must. You can't just be on autopilot. For example, I correctly identify the patient when the patient is brought into the room by asking the patient for the name and birth date. I have my requisition or my medical record there to compare to make sure I have the right person. If I just simply choose the wrong name on the work list, that's a human error. After the initial error is made, you should have rules in place to find this type of error, like when you get into PACS, you okay your images, you compare to make sure the name and a session number matches. Have you ever noticed, though, that when an error happens, there's usually a series of errors that happens in sequence, just like lining up the holes in Swiss cheese? Usually at-risk behavior has occurred where assumptions are made by the staff that result in an error. The staff involved has to be coached and re-educated. These employees are encouraged to open up so that others can learn. Staff meetings are opportune times for staff to share this type of experience with everyone. Reckless behavior involves knowingly making bad choices. Think about speeding through the beginning of a red light. You took your driver's test, you passed, you have your license, you know that if you do not stop, you might be hit, yet you fly through and possibly endanger your life and the life of others. Is that at risk or is that reckless behavior? Well, based on the fact that you passed your driver's test and your knowledge and experience that you have, that's reckless behavior. In Morgantown, West Virginia, it is unusual for people to run red lights. In fact, a lot of people stop on yellow lights, some break through green lights. But when I go to Pittsburgh, if I stop at a yellow light, I'm going to get rear-ended. This kind of tells you that the cultures of the cities are different. Our hospital exhibits similar cultures, just like when comparing these two cities. If everyone does it and everyone gets away with it, you'll continue doing it. If you constantly see policemen pulling people over for running red lights, don't you think that bad behavior would stop? If we continually allow our employees to take shortcuts without saying anything, aren't we condoning at-risk behavior? These are things to think about at your facility. You must design for system reliability and to reduce human error. You must have clear policies for employees to follow. Technology needs to be hardwired if you can. Equipment and policies must be evaluated frequently and put stops in place to help with mistakes so that you don't proceed to the next step. Barriers in place, double checks, all those things limit human error. There are 11 different factors affecting human performance. You must design for human reliability. Let's face it, we're all human and we all make mistakes, but we need to try to limit. Selecting the right people for the job is where it all begins. That is the most important factor affecting human performance. My motto is always, I can teach skills, but I can't teach someone to have a good attitude or have good work ethic. But with that said, I need to make sure that I do have the people with the right skills. Personality issues will cause conflicts and potentially put your patient at risk. You must have teamwork at all times, leaving feelings behind. If there's silos in your facility where departments don't work together, knock down those silos. If there's lack of structure, no one will know what is expected. Environmental factors truly make or break your safety culture. Are you giving clear direction to define expectations? Supervisors and managers must be trained to effectively investigate and follow up. Consistency organization-wide is a must. You must reinforce what is supposed to be done by training and communicating effectively. Not everyone learns the same way, so meet your individual's needs when you're communicating with them and training them. Also, past errors have to be communicated. You need to be transparent. It's pretty easy to say that these roadblocks will contribute to errors, but how do we prevent errors from reaching these roadblocks? Review your policies and procedures with staff. Ask them if they understand. Do competencies on anything that's giving your staff problems. We have policies that state that equipment malfunctions have to be reported, and then we hold our employees accountable for reporting the equipment issues in their annual evaluations. When something bad happens involving equipment, the first thing I hear from a tech is, well, that machine has been like that for months. And I say, really? And when were you going to tell me? I don't use that equipment, you do. So it's your responsibility to report your issues to your supervisor. So we need to hold our people accountable. How easy is it to complete an unusual occurrence report? We had technology in the past that was very cumbersome. It took about 15 minutes to report it online. So people chose to not report the near misses and chose to not report occurrences. So at that time, I actually said, jot it down on a piece of paper and I'll put it in for you. Luckily, we did upgrade our software and it doesn't take much time at all now to report unusual occurrences. Incompetent staff, is it you or is it them? If you have incompetent staff, then take the time to train them. According to a Future of Work and Employee Learning poll, where 1,000 employees were surveyed, about 1/2 of the workers say that their employees penalize them for not having the right skills. And about 1/3 say they avoid asking for training for fear of seeming incompetent. More than 1/3 of those people surveyed say that their employers do not understand their skill gap and that their employers don't offer training to help them improve. If you're pointing the finger at your employees, just remember there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. Is your training plan effective? Inconsistent performers. So do you have employees that go around acting like it's Groundhog's Day? And I don't know if y'all remember the movie Groundhog's Day. These people woke up every day and it was the same day over and over again, but they didn't know that they were reliving that day. Well, I have employees who sometimes say, oh, I didn't know that. Well, I know I just trained them on it the day before. And then they say the same thing again the next time it comes up. So document, document, document. And are these people lazy or are they incompetent? So address your poor performers. Make sure that they do perform the way you want them to. Distractions. In CT, the phone rings about 20 times an hour, and always when you're trying to put an IV in or doing something that requires your undivided attention, like 3D reconstructions. I've empowered my techs to ignore the phone when they're working with a patient or doing something like that, where if they ignore it, it could cause a distraction if they go ahead and give into it. The person will call me if they don't answer the phone, or they'll call a supervisor or manager, and that's fine. We'd rather that happen than an error occurred because the tech was distracted. Miscommunication is probably the #1 roadblock. People assume that other people know what they're thinking or doing, and that's how bad things happen. I've encouraged our areas to have a routine and stick with it. If they have to deviate from the routine, stop and retrace their steps. If they have to step away, they need to leave a note on what needs to happen next. Like if they're drinking oral contrast, the next person needs to be able to step in and know exactly what needs to take place. We also have a communication book where the techs can write in it what's going on. Maybe it's a new protocol or maybe the equipment's been down, but anybody who's been out for a while can walk up to that communication book and look from the date that they were last there forward and catch up on what they've been missing. Hostile work environment. Come on, you know it's true. You walk into the radiologist reading room and they say, what? That might be enough to prevent some timid tech from going in and asking them to assess the patient the next time a patient doesn't act or look exactly right, and a bad outcome might occur. We have to empower our team to speak up for themselves in a kind and caring way. I tell my team to say in a positive tone, hey, I really don't appreciate how you're talking to me right now. I'm trying to help this patient, and I know that's important to you too. The hostile person usually de-escalates when the information is presented that way. Role play with those struggling, the ones that don't know how to handle the intense situations, so that they're ready to act versus react. Last month, an issue arose between a new anxious tech and a radiologist. The tech thought she was doing the right thing, but she was actually being a roadblock. The radiologist got in her face, it escalated. She came to me in tears. I waited for a few hours for everyone to calm down, and then I talked to her. I told her she probably should apologize to the radiologist, even though he was the one that wasn't so nice to her, but I knew that they'd have to work together again in the future. So we went, the tech apologized, and while the radiologist didn't really accept the tech's apology, I think he appreciated the effort, and they do work together just fine now. So it's really important to help these people so that they don't have escalating situations with other people. Lack of teamwork. We all have one of those employees, the one that frequently calls off on midnight shifts, sticking their coworker with a double shift, that tech who whines whenever they might have to do a couple patients. Normally everyone else is doing 3 or 4 patients at the same time. That tech who clocks in but won't report to the work area because they have to get coffee or change their shoes or change their clothes, or maybe they have to go and talk to somebody else first. Yeah, that lack of teamwork will lead to errors. People will deliberately withhold information from these poor, deserving souls, but who suffers in the end? The patient. We have to be vigilant in addressing these difficult employees so that patient care is not jeopardized. Failure to report near misses, we already talked about that cumbersome technology. We want to make sure that people do report. Another reason they don't report is because they're afraid they're going to get yelled at. Well, the key is don't yell at them. Intentional rule violations. Some techs feel like that if they take shortcuts and get away with it, then it's okay to continue breaking the rules. They might seem to be more efficient than their peers. So while they're taking a break, their employees are just chugging along, still doing their work. So it's really important that we stress safety is first over all other things, and then living that. Whenever we go to praise our techs for a job well done, we're going to praise the ones we know and are doing it right and not taking shortcuts. Using an algorithm will help you take the emotion out of your decisions, and it might just prevent a wrongful termination suit. For example, several years ago, I had a CT tech who had a patient fall onto the floor while the patient was transferring from the cart to the CT table. I mean, I've been doing CTs for a very long time, and I've never even had a near miss with someone falling or nearly falling off of the CT table. I watch my patients like a hawk, and I expect everyone to. Well, when I was moving my patients, I always had the outside rail up, the cart locked and pushed tightly up against the CT table. And then I would walk around to the other side very carefully while I'm watching that patient. And then I would either hold onto their arm or their hand and help guide them over. Or if they were on a slider, I would just pull them across. So anyways, the CT tech stated that this patient, who was way up there in age, moved so quickly that she rolled the wrong way on the cart and ended up on the floor on the other side. And my first reaction was, what in the world? Why was the roll even down on the opposite side? So when I questioned the tech, she showed no remorse. I was very angry. But when I plugged this whole situation into the Just Culture algorithm, it came out as at-risk behavior, even human error. So I re-educated, I documented the counseling and heightened supervision, and that's all I really could offer on that. Had I termed her on the day of the fall, then that probably would have been a wrongful termination suit, because there are people who fall, in the hospital and people aren't fired for it. So you take your emotions out of it, let the algorithm help you. On a side note, that employee was termed a month later for a different reason. So anyway, so here's our Just Culture algorithm. You can see that you just start in the upper top left where it says start, and you walk through the questions and answers. So it really does not take any studying to use this algorithm, since you can easily determine if the actions were intended, the consequences were intended, if substance abuse was involved, and so on. At the end, we're going to walk through some of these scenarios, and you'll be able to see the algorithm a little bit more. So remember, the algorithm is not a weapon. Managers need to focus on hospital systems, proper education, and not lose sight of the valuable employee component within the system. You have to ask the right questions to find the gaps. Interrogation is probably not a good way to make people talk, but meeting with them individually and asking them what's going on, having them express what happened, you express your concern, that is the way to get them to buy in and to actually solve problems. You will build trust if you listen to your employee, express concern with whatever happened, console them when necessary, and offer suggestions for error prevention next time. A root cause analysis is used for sentinel events at our facility. We also use RCAs for any serious near misses. For example, we had a patient get a wrong exam performed in our department. They were sent down, the RN had them, the transporter called, said, can they come down? The RN did not look to see if the patient was really for that exam or not. So they went ahead and released him to the transporter. That patient was not for the exam. The transporter failed to identify the patient. They brought the patient down to the ultrasound tech. The ultrasound tech took the handoff information, did not verify that the patient was the same patient, did the exam, and then sent the patient upstairs. So then whenever the physician was making rounds, that's how they figured out when they said, oh, we got your ultrasound results back. And they were like, I didn't have an ultrasound. Thank goodness that happened, because that was how we were able to backtrack. So we had an RCA, this was several years ago, and we were able to track back that, the root of the problem was not identifying the patients. And remember that Swiss cheese where all the holes line up. The nurse didn't look to see if the patient was even for that. The transporter didn't verify, and then the ultrasound didn't verify the patient identifiers. So that was the root cause of everything. The holes in the Swiss cheese that constantly comes back up. And I don't know why that happens. When one bad thing happens, it just continues down the line. So what occurred in the workplace? Do our documents prove that we took action, either with re-education or with disciplinary action? They need to for legal reasons also. If someone comes to you reporting bad behavior, if you observe something that is contrary to policy, you must investigate. Do it right then and there if possible, so that it's fresh in the employees' minds. Include the right people when doing an investigation and never assume who, what, when, where, and why, and how. When employees are telling on coworkers, they sometimes ask for confidentiality. Guess what? If there are only 2 people involved, then the other person will probably know that there's somebody talking about them. You can't promise confidentiality. It's important to tell the accused not to ask questions and not to retaliate in any way. I usually have the code of conduct policy printed out with that section highlighted, stating that retaliation is grounds for dismissal, just to back up my instructions. When you're investigating an issue with an employee, make sure that you write exactly what is said, put the exact words in quotation marks. Let's say, let me make sure that I have this right, and then you read back your notes to them. Only fact find and don't lead. Do not promise that the employees won't be written up or fired in regards to an issue. You might not know it yet, because there may be more facts that you find, and then termination might be warranted. It's so important to involve human resources for policy issues, since your facility needs to be consistent house-wide. I know there's some facilities that don't have human resources, but again, that consistency is what is key. If someone terminates in one area, say for not identifying the patient, yet in your area you ignore it or you just counsel, then you've just set yourself up for a wrongful termination suit at your facility. And that is why you never promise. Reference helpful policies and use the Just Culture algorithm to categorize the incident. We recently had a tech report an issue regarding a transporter, and when we questioned the transporter, we really didn't know that she was telling us the truth, so the involved patient was questioned. The transporter was telling the truth, so don't ever assume without getting all sides of the story. Determine the level of counseling discipline needed and consult AHRA if necessary. Follow up with the employee with the investigation findings and the plan. In this case, the transporter was encouraged to not joke with the patient about something that could have been perceived differently by the patient. So maintain investigation documents. If the employee has been disciplined for something like this in the past, then the next level of discipline should be used. So if you just did a notes to file last time regarding bad behavior, this time it gets a verbal warning. You can't skip a level of discipline unless the policy dictates that you can. So where do we start in developing a just culture? Number 1 is do a patient safety culture survey with your employees to find your baseline. How do they feel about your safety culture? Number 2 is develop a plan that addresses your weaknesses. And then number 3, communicate your plan and publicize your efforts through the entire facility. You need staff buy-in. So revise policies and procedures if necessary to reflect the change, communicate changes, also define expectations clearly. Make sure that everyone involved understands the expected changes in behavior. Live it. This comes from senior leadership down to the frontline workers. Tell everyone how you're doing. They need to hear how the audits are going. Be transparent. Encourage questions and answers and have an open door policy. Seeing results encourages staff's buy-in. Display the information. So here's part of our department scorecard that we present at monthly staff meetings, plus we put it on our radiology internet site. Now, disclaimer, we haven't had in-person monthly staff meetings for a while, but this is what we did prior to COVID. We do want our staff to be 100% where the goal is 100%. So whenever someone messes up, you know that peer pressure will kick in. For example, the state of West Virginia requires that technologists document anytime that a patient is held. So we run a report monthly to show all patients that are 2 years old and younger. That catches most of the people who are held. Sometimes we have elderly, but normally they're the younger children. So we look at the human holder log to make sure that the hold was documented. It's sort of difficult for the tech to deny that the patient was held if you see extra fingers in the images. So those techs receive a friendly reminder letter the first time around. The second time around, they would receive a verbal warning, and it would show up on their annual evaluation that they've been counseled. And if it happens again, the employee would receive a written warning for failure to follow policy after being educated. When an employee feels that he or she works in a healthy work environment, the employee is more likely to provide high-quality patient care. They feel better about themselves. We implemented the JUST culture in 2011, and you can see a jump between 2009 and 2012 with overall scores. That isn't all due just to the JUST culture, but it sure helped, along with our efforts to make improvements. So you see the scores here, willing to put in extra effort, it jumped up a little bit, but the one that I see is really huge is I often leave work with a feeling of satisfaction. If they have consistency, then they're going to appreciate working here and they're going to feel satisfied. When using a JUST culture, employees know what to expect because we do the same thing every time regarding how we treat particular errors. That makes them trust us more and have a clear understanding of expectations. And you can just look down the line of the questions that we asked and the improvements that we experienced. I don't know how many times I've said, you know what, we're all human. All we can do is learn from our mistakes and move on. You can't undo it, so let's just share it and make sure it doesn't happen again. In turn, for us being human, employees feel positive about our relationships, and you see a marked improvement in scores. So the director does a good job of leading. This department went from 3.6 to 4.9. You see the person I report to does a good job running my area. That went from 3.7 up to 4.9. Prior to the JUST culture, we were probably more punitive in nature than blame-free in my department. I feel like our employees began trusting us a lot more after we implemented the JUST culture. Our most recent employee pulse survey showed a great score on feeling comfortable reporting patient safety issues. This speaks volumes on the success of our JUST culture. The JUST culture makes employees speak up about issues and want to own the work environment. They bring solutions with their problems. That is awesome as a leader. Shortcuts are reduced when employees recognize that they are responsible for following policies and procedures and that our safety culture will not tolerate unnecessary risks. When employees see benefits of reporting safety issues or potential safety issues, they'll take the time to report them. Define your expectations clearly and mean them. Now, on a side note, remember that you must resurvey the safety culture, continue working on your weak areas, and benchmark your results so that you know how you as an organization, as a department, are doing. Perhaps a scorecard would be helpful in documenting and tracking. You have to determine what's important to you and then figure out how to get your staff to buy in. So let's review some scenarios of different behaviors and determine where they fall on the JUST culture algorithm. Scenario 1, the tech was performing a CT that required IV contrast on a patient. The tech documented on the screening form that the patient did not have sickle cell anemia, but the patient did have sickle cell anemia. After investigation, it was determined that the tech never actually asked the patient that question. So let's look at the algorithm and what type of behavior is this. So we go to the start where the actions intended. Well, yeah, I think he purposely didn't screen the patient. So were the consequences intended? I don't think he meant to harm it. It's just that most patients don't have sickle cell anemia. So I'm going to go up to no. Substance use or abuse? No. Knowingly violated safe operating procedures? Yes. So then you go down possible reckless behavior or system-induced violation. So then that's at-risk behavior. Scenario 2, tech was performing an MRI exam on a patient. The written order said MRI brain enhanced, but the tech read the order wrong and completed and charged the patient for an MRI brain unenhanced. So let's look at the algorithm and what type of behavior. So again, were the actions intended? No. Was there substance abuse or abuse? No. Did they knowingly violate safe operating procedure? No. Does it pass a substitution test? Would someone else with the same training do the same thing? Yeah, we're human. We might read something wrong. History of unsafe acts. Has this person done the same thing in the past? No. So this is a non-culpable error and it's a blameless error. So all you can do is retrain, counseling, heightened supervision. So in this person's case, all we did was say, hey, you really need to double check your orders, and we've not had an error after that. Scenario 3. Now, just an FYI, this is the same person that was scenario 1 of not actually asking the patient about sickle cell anemia. So the tech puts the patient on the CT table. The tech did the scout image for the CT head and then sent the patient back to the ER. The tech charged the exam and okays that there's one image in PACS to be read when he clearly didn't do the exam at all. All he did was the scout film. The ED calls and asks for the report 1 hour later. The clerk determines there's only one image in there, calls CT. The CT tech calls for the patient to be sent back over. The tech does not report anything to the supervisor. The ER calls the supervisor to report the issue. The tech was questioned and they denied any wrongdoing. They said the machine ate the CT exam. So the CT room was closed. CT manufacturer was called in. The logs show that only a scout, a TOPE image was performed at the exact same time, but that no other images were obtained on that patient. We have policies and procedures in place that require that tech to check all images before they click OK for the radiologist to read. The tech has a history of multiple errors with write-ups, negative attitude write-ups, and so on. I could go on and on with that one. So we'll say start, were the actions intended? No, I don't think he purposely didn't do the entire exam. Was substance use or abuse? No, but we're really surely beginning to wonder. Knowingly violated safe operating procedure? No, I don't think he purposely did it. Passed substitution test? No, I've not had anyone else say that the CT machine ate the images. So again, possible reckless behavior or system-induced violation. So, this person was having repeated issues of at-risk behavior. So here's a checklist for implementing a just culture. Basics have to be done, like policy procedure, how to report an unusual occurrence, how complaints are to be handled, education done for leaders, employees surveyed, and a follow-up survey date set in advance so that you don't forget. Employees educated on new policies, new behaviors identified, make sure you have an open door policy. Employees understand that it's their responsibility to learn from their mistakes. And just culture added as an agenda item to talk about monthly or in your round so that you can talk about what you're retraining them on and then also being transparent about lessons learned. So thank you all so much for your time. I tried to leave some time so that you'd have an opportunity to ask questions. So please type your questions in the chat box and I'll do my best to answer. And if I run out of time, I will follow up with you after the session is over. And also, if you're interested in receiving the Just Culture algorithm, I can email it to you, any of the checklists, whatever. Just email me and I will email it to you. So thank you very much for your attention today.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for this enlightening presentation. It was fascinating to hear you speak about this. We do have a few questions that have come in, and as you mentioned, our audience can ask questions by using the questions feature in their GoToWebinar dashboard. Our first question is, what have you done to ensure safety is a top priority from your employees?
Well, that's a good question. I actually added a question to my interview form asking the potential employees what their primary focus is when giving patient care. So if they answer anything other than safety, I ask additional probing questions to determine, how aware are they of safety? And if the applicant doesn't really seem to care about safety, I educate and then I kind of listen to them. What are their responses? I point out valid safety points. And then I know if the person is the right one for the job or not, because safety is #1 in my book.
Great. Our next question is, how long does it take to actually change the culture?
I think it probably takes a couple years. Trust is big. So once your employees know that you're there to fix processes and not to point blame at them, then I think that will help them grow and want to help. I make sure I'm always available by email or phone so that if issues come up, I'm there as a resource, and our managers do the same. I think that speaks volumes that we care about our employees and we're there to help them. That wasn't the case in years past. There were supervisors who couldn't be reached, and thankfully the culture has changed, even within our own management team, so that we are always there as a resource. And I think, you know, the first year we saw positive results on our score whenever they resurveyed, but I think it's even come further than that.
Great. Our next question is, have you ever had an employee who was reckless? And if so, how did you handle it?
So yes, unfortunately I did, and it was actually the person in that scenario 1 and 3 that I just talked about. That individual was coached and counseled for at-risk behavior. His behaviors did not get better, they actually got worse, and that person was terminated. And if an employee chooses to ignore policies and procedures even after being coached and counseled, then I believe it's reckless behavior, and why would you keep them? I wouldn't tolerate it any longer. So after that employee was freed to be employed elsewhere, there was such a culture shift within that modality. The people who remained, the techs that worked with him, big change in their attitudes, probably a 180-degree turn actually. And we knew that we made a great move, not only to quit spending so much time on that one individual, but also because our team, they had immediate relief.
All right, our next question is, can you speak a bit to quality errors that do not rise to patient safety events, such as poor technique, exposure, clipping, etc.? How do you track and hold a tech accountable for these? And also, how do you adjust for volume differences? I know that was a long question, so let me know if you need me to repeat it.
I'll try to hit all of the questions. So we actually just started a performance improvement process on one of the things you mentioned. So our repeat rate is up, and we've identified that it's because of poor positioning in a couple exams. And so there was a trend. So what we're going to do is re-educate everyone to start with. And then based on what we see, then it may be that those individuals need to receive, you know, performance improvement themselves. But as a beginning point, I think for quality, you just have to re-educate the team, make sure that you're giving them information that they need. You know, you don't want to like point out people individually unless it is a truly one individual that's involved. And what was the second half?
Let's see. How do you track and hold tech accountable for these? And also, how do you adjust for volume differences?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what that question really means, but like volume differences, it could be that one area is cranking out the patients and the other area, you know, like MRI, for example, you're doing one patient every 45 minutes, and radiology, for example, you're doing maybe one patient every 10 minutes or 5 minutes. So I think that it's still the same thing. You have to hold your people accountable to do their job correctly. So you just need to make sure that the processes are put in place so that they know they have to do what's right for the patient. And it's not okay to have excuses because I was busy. You know, you have to do what is necessary to take care of each patient.
Okay, we do have a follow-up saying, meaning if Tech A does 500 exams with 2 errors is better than Tech B that does 50 exams with 2 errors. And that's what they meant by adjusting for volume.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I think that you'd have to kind of take it into perspective. So if I have done 500 exams and I have 2 errors, then you're doing pretty good well, you know. I don't know that I would really focus on that unless it was a big quality issue that you're seeing a trend. You know, if you've already met with them and talked about it, I'd just meet with them again, because it sounds like they're a high performer. And if they only have 2 quality issues out of 500, great. I think that I wouldn't focus so much on that. But the person who did 50 exams and they're having errors, yeah, you probably would want to help them a little more. They might need to receive more education.
All right, our next question, Brenda, is Did your organization develop the algorithm, or is it a standard form?
We developed it in conjunction with there's a Joint Commission kind of standard that how you should handle, bad things. We just kind of went down through our own algorithm. And I think that I worked with a risk manager at that time, and we kind of moved things around to fit what we thought was the best model for our facility.
Great. Thank you so much, Brenda, for a fantastic presentation. As a reminder to our audience, you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. The survey will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit, and you will be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. ICE Magazine is proud to bring you our new monthly webinar series to the imaging industry. Thank you for being part of the ICE community. For more information about our upcoming ICE webinars, please visit icewebinars.live. Thank you all and have a great day.